All right, hi guys. This is Saad Ali from Group One, and the topic we selected for our presentation is media analysis of data usage and the Messi versus Ronaldo debate in soccer. So, for context, soccer is the biggest sport in the world in terms of fans and viewership, and this is why Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo are two of the most famous and successful athletes in the world, with both of them having hundreds of millions of fans. Now, the debate became really big in the 2010s decade because of how much it dominated the soccer world at that time. And the debate amongst fans is that who is the better player and largely about who is the greatest soccer player of all time. Now, the research question that we used for our analysis was how convincingly do media sources use statistics to support claims in the Messi and Ronaldo debate? And the thesis is that while media articles do appear to be data-driven, some opinion-based sources often selectively use stats, which results in biased and less reliable conclusions and does derail like fans in their opinions of players. Now, for the first article that we selected that was from the week. We saw that it was much more structured and used a lot of stats, and overall was more balanced and objective. Whereas the second article that we selected, which was from the Times of India, was more narrative driven and used like really few stats. But overall, both stats did lack clear transparency in how the data was selected and represented. For a visual that we made for the article comparison, we saw that the week used a lot of stats, especially total appearances by both players, and divided the goals into international and domestic goals to see where they were more dominant. And then also included a really big stat, which is the Ballon d'Or, which is an annual award given to soccer players. And it is the greatest award that a soccer player could get for the calendar year.
Okay, so here are the articles and the links to them. We have the article from the week, and then we have another article from the Times of India that we used. So why does this matter? We see all the time that the media has a really big influence on the public perception of athletes, depending on how they perceive the athlete, what they say about the athlete, how they judge the athlete's actions, good or bad. This is a misuse of data. It's unfair. It leads to a lot of inaccurate conclusions, and it reflects the broader issue in data communication, more specifically in sports media, and how that affects the players themselves. So the specific claims that each use, the week uses a lot more career-wide statistics, just overall more statistics, all prior and leading up to the current time, considering goals, assists, trophies, long term. How does that change since they started their careers? Awards that they won, just like the Ballon d'Or. But the Times of India considers like the 2026 opportunities that they have, the titles that they could possibly win, the awards they could win, and using that to defend its argument on who's the better player. They both consider you know good ideas to use for the statistics for their argument, but that's not exactly fair consideration. They're not considering everything. Data resources and sample size. So the both articles and combined were considering career statistics, current and recent performance, and then wins, specific achievements, who's winning the World Cup, who's not, when. You're considering these both at different levels, but it's not clear exactly how much and how little of the different statistics that they're considering. So we don't have a clearly defined data set. It's just a bunch of random games. We don't know exactly what they're considering, what they're not. Evidence and support. So yeah, they're considering the career stats, performance, historical achievements, awards. The evidence that these articles are using is quite selective compared to what they're trying to argue. They're not considering the opposite opinion. They avoid that. It's not justifiable, and we can tell they're not doing a lot of external research. So the evidence is partially relevant, but they're not considering the whole picture.
Here, we analyze how each article actually approaches their comparison. The Times of India uses a narrative driven method focusing on recent performance and projecting into future success, especially looking ahead to 2026. However, there's no clear data set, time frame, or structured method, so the conclusions are more speculative than analytical. On the other hand, the week takes a more descriptive approach, comparing multiple career statistics like goals, assists, and trophies. While this is more structured, this still lacks true statistical rigor, since it doesn't control for external factors like team strength or league difficulty. Overall, both articles attempt analysis, but neither actually follows a formal or reliable statistical methodology. Building on methodology, we now evaluate the validity of the analysis. The Times of India essentially has no statistical framework, there's no hypothesis, there's no testing, and no way to measure uncertainty. This makes their conclusions largely based on opinion and quite unverifiable. The Week does this slightly better by using multiple descriptive statistics, but still treats all metrics equally. For example, a goal in a minor league is treated the same as a World Cup goal, which is clearly misleading. Importantly, neither article uses inferential statistics like confidence intervals or hypothesis testing. So while the data looks convincing, it's not statistically generalizable or reliable. One major issue that we notice is that neither article includes any visualization. This makes it harder for readers to interpret comparisons clearly, and without graphs or charts, the articles heavily rely on written narratives, which can introduce bias. Visualizations are pretty important because they allow us to see trends, patterns, and relationships in data, and without them, readers are more likely to accept claims at face value instead of actually critically analyzing the data. So the lack of visuals actually reinforces the narrative-driven nature of both articles. To improve these articles, we suggest several better visualization strategies. First, instead of raw totals, we could use per game statistics, which give a more fair comparison. We could also use a performance over time graph, which would show how each player evolves across different seasons and eras. Third, adding uncertainty measures like error bars could show how reliable this data is, especially for predictions in the future. And incorporating contextual factors like team strength or league difficulty could make these comparisons more meaningful. And these improvements would shift the analysis from simple storytelling to true data driven insight. So here we have a slide of some examples of what these improvements could look like. On the left, we compare raw totals versus some normalized statistics, highlighting how conclusions could change depending on how some data is presented. And on the right, we do have a goals over time graph, which help visualize performance trends across the years. These types of visuals make it much more nicer and easier to identify patterns and differences between players. And more importantly, they reduce the reliance on narrative and allow the data to speak for itself. And this demonstrates how proper visualization can lead to more accurate and less biased conclusions.
Alright, moving on to limitations of bias. So, beginning with the Times of India article, this article relies heavily on hypothetical opportunities. So, instead of comparing actual raw data, this article estimates how many titles both Ronaldo and Messi could end up competing for in 2026. This kind of data is a possibility set rather than a set of results, and it depends greatly on assumptions about the club and future success of these athletes, which is subject to heavy bias because it's really the author's opinion. This article also features analytically weak data. This article focuses almost entirely on past and future trophy count for each of these athletes. This fixation can cause the reader to believe that this debate only comes down to trophy count, which is really unrealistic, as there are many other factors to consider as well. Moving on to the weak article. So this article uses a very selective data set. The weak focuses on statistics like goals, trophies, and international records. While these statistics are okay to use, they don't give the full story, as they don't take into account other factors like actual minutes played, league strength, team strength, and role within the team. This article emphasizes cumulative totals over rate and situational stats as well. So the week's format tends to display things like career goals, appearances, and trophies. These statistics tend to favor longevity rather than equally important characteristics like peak efficiency or quality of competitions. So moving on to some alternative interpretations of the data. All championships can be viewed the same. So readers who are uneducated in soccer can believe all trophies are of the same value, not taking quality of competition into account. Team trophies can also be interpreted as team success rather than individual success. Some readers may interpret the championships as a reflection of the athlete's club strength rather than Messi or Ronaldo's individual strength themselves. And finally, awards can be viewed as recognition, not objective proof. The week highlights FIFA Player of the Year awards. Many readers may view these awards as a display of popularity amongst the voters rather than pure talent.
So stepping back, this matters beyond just the Messi versus Ronaldo debate. What we're really seeing is how media shapes public perception. Fans form strong opinions based on statistics that look objective even when they aren't used rigorously. And that's a really key issue. Data can feel convincing without actually being strong evidence. This doesn't just happen in sports. We see the same kind of selective use of statistics show up in politics, businesses, and even public health, where weak analysis can still influence how people think and make decisions. So, coming back to our research question, how convincingly do these articles use statistics? The answer is not very convincingly. Both sources present data as objective, but they rely on selective and incomplete information. There's no real statistical analysis, no normalization, no testing, no clearly defined data set. So the conclusions aren't actually well supported. The comparison ends up being oversimplified and ignores important context like team strength, league levels, and like difficulties and player position. So the biggest takeaway from all of that is that statistics don't speak for themselves. How they're used matters. Both articles chose specific metrics that support their argument rather than the complete picture. And because of that, the Messi versus Ronaldo debate isn't really decided by data. It's shaped by how the data is selected and presented.